Okay, hi, I'm Paul, and back to another episode of Plusma-cast, the show where I speak with people of the creative industry in order to get them to share their experience. So today I have Simon Dayton of 123RF. He's a creative director, and I'm here to speak today about his journey from, from a very different field entirely, and how he became, and how he got into photos and eventually, leading a team here in 123RF Malaysia. Okay, so thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you for having me, Paul. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so with Plusma-cast, as I normally do, is that I want to pick your story so that it helps others to understand that, hey, I didn't just become a creative director overnight. It's a professional journey.
Right.
And how I typically start is, okay, when's the earliest point that maybe you thought that, hey, you get into this? Because by your profile, you're an IT guy.
That's right, yeah. And I always find it very amusing that a lot of people in the creative line do actually have an IT background. It goes back almost, in my very early childhood. I think you discover at that point whether you have any kind of creativity in you or not. Mm-hmm. I come from a place called Hackney in North London, and I grew up in the 1970s and 1980s. It was a time of great uncertainty. When I grew up there were race riots. We were always trying to dodge the bombs from the IRA and things like this.
Those were the Thatcher years, right?
Yeah, the Thatcher years. So from that you can tell that unemployment rates were very, very high. Mm-hmm. So it was very hard for anyone to actually achieve anything. I spent much of my early youth doodling and drawing, mm-hmm. But I never really got into anything creative at that point. I think when I was at school, my school years were very, very disturbing. There was a time when it was very hard to actually learn anything. The schools was very disruptive, lots of violence and lots of disruption in the classes. I think one of the only subjects I really excelled in was art.
Right.
Art and technical drawing, funny enough. So I came out of school with qualifications in art, mm-hmm. But where do you go with an art job in London in the 1970s and 1980s? So you get stuck in a kind of like a bit of a vicious cycle where you don't have good qualifications to get a very high job. My parents were not really rich. I did not have the capabilities or the abilities to go to university at the time.
Yeah.
But I stumbled on an opportunity. It was very, very fortunate. And this was the time, you understand, before the internet, before home computers really became into the scene.
I mean, in the 80s, I had a home computer.
Yeah.
And in those days, it's considered primitive by current standards.
Exactly, yeah. But it was never really something that spread throughout the culture. I mean, there were very few people who had computers at the time. So I was very fortunate. The government recognized computers would be a new thing, and it would be
the way forward for industry.
Exactly, yes. So they created schemes. They created a couple of schemes throughout England where you can go to a technical college that they set up, and they will pay you, which was great. So I managed to get on one of these schemes. I think I was one of the first people in England to actually manage to get on one of these schemes. And there was a class of about 20 people.
Yeah.
And we spent 2 years learning computer programming, learning microelectronics, soldering things to circuit boards, programming from binary code and advanced mathematics and things like that. So at that time, it was fascinating because there was never anything else like it.
Yeah.
All right. So from there, you come out after 2 years with your certs. But again, there's no jobs in computers. So what do? There's really nothing for you. So there's a load of us that are actually jobless with all these qualifications in computer science and that, but there's nothing to do. So it's back trying to find a job. Again, in those days, for working class families like myself, if you didn't have someone who was working in the post office or on the print who could get you in there, it was, again, quite difficult to find any kind of employment. I was fortunate again that my sister was working at a law firm.
Right.
She was working at a law firm, and she managed to get me a job there. And I didn't start in computers, but I started right at the very bottom, right at the very bottom of the rails. And my first job was actually working in a post room, delivering letters. Yeah, in the mail room, delivering letters. So I spent many years working in there, working under the supervision of these three really amazing old gentlemen who would educate me on their experiences during World War II when they were serving in India. So again, everything you do, you try to learn as much as you can about it. You don't see things as being bad or negative, but you try to take as much as you can from it. So my early experience is really right at the very bottom of the rung.
I mean, you may learn something and you probably don't understand what the relevance is.
Exactly.
You never know that something might be useful.
Absolutely, yeah. So you pick up on all these things, and it's how you absorb information from very, very young, you know.
Okay.
Again, the culture there in London during that period was one of great negativity. And one of the only ways people could escape from it was music. Mm-hmm. So from a very early age, again, I found myself very attracted by music, which then created subcultures and created genres. You absorb yourself into different genres of music throughout the sphere. You listen to radio, you listen to Top of the Pops, which was a really big thing in those days, you know.
Top of the Pops, and I think punk, was it?
Punk, I was there, the advent of punk, which was quite fun. The real punks, not the false ones you see today, but the real punks. So again, the culture, the way you grew up, the information you absorb from an early age is very, very important on how you grow yourself.
Yep.
And I think even though you may enjoy doing art, you may do art, you may not get into that line of work, but you still have to absorb the culture around you. And I think that's very important for anyone to learn. So it was many years after that I managed to eventually get into an IT job within the same company. I was at this law firm for about 10 or 11 years, and halfway through that period, I managed to get into IT. So I could finally utilize the skills that I'd learned in IT. And I enjoyed IT. I was a total geek. I'm still a total geek, actually. I really am. I still build my own computers.
Yeah.
But again, it's nothing in the realm of creativity and art. You're going along a technical path now. Right? And then it got to around the mid-90s, just when the internet was born. And that's when the creativity part came into it.
Let's see, like the 90s, the internet was being deployed, but it really got widespread around the mid-90s.
Yeah, it was still very, very early. And I managed to get a job in a company that sold publication companies for MBA courses around the world. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to translate their entire book collection into online. And this was before Dreamweaver or anything, so everything was hand coded in text. Right? So my first creative job on web was translating 2,000 pages onto online using the text editor.
I'll take it for granted because I'm a bit hard to imagine writing past 5 pages nowadays.
Right.
You know, even with text editing and that, which makes sense. But 2,000, 2,000 pages at the base code.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's again starting at the bottom rung. There's going to be a point to all this eventually. Sure. Starting again at the bottom and learning right from the very core of what you do is vital to understanding what you do. I mean, I can still look at a web page now and understand the entire HTML part of it. There's a lot of code in there that may be a bit beyond my skill levels now because I've not been in the industry for a while. So I did web design and webmastering and that for about 8 years. I went to work for an American company in Belgium as a webmaster for a few years, which was a great experience.
Okay.
But after that, I started to eventually kind of get like a little bit bored of it, and I wanted to do something hugely different. So when I came back from Belgium, I run my own sort of like web business for a while. I had a friend who had some servers, and we would do design and server applications together. And I did that for a few years, and then I had the opportunity to come to Malaysia in 2003.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you spent the majority of the time, in Britain and the continent, I guess. Yeah. And obviously, it was something totally different, dramatic.
Yeah.
How did the opportunity come about? Because Malaysia is thousands and thousands
I don't know. I felt very great gravitation towards Asia. I don't know why. I've been to Hong Kong a few times, and I thought, this is great. This is something different. I think being in the UK was becoming a real rat race. It was becoming harder to survive. The cost of living was increasing, and I just wanted to get out and do something new, do something different. So there was an opportunity to come to Malaysia. I won't go into too much detail about that, but
fair enough.
Yeah, I came over. I made a decision in about 4 days whether to come or not, and I dropped everything and just said goodbye and came over and just again start from the bottom here. Right. I continued running my business for about 6 months until the money started running out, and eventually I got a job here, working for a publication whose name I shan't mention.
No, yeah. That's fine.
So my first experiences in Malaysia, I worked for a year at a publication. I was doing advertising and publications. Was a big culture shock. It was hugely different to what I was used to. The way the place was run was completely odd. Literally 17-hour days, like 6.5 days a week.
Okay, odd.
Yeah.
So you mean odd and not shocking, is it?
It was quite shocking. There was a bit of a culture shock, but it was, I would say, odd in the way that I've never seen a creative department run in such a very strange way. I'll come into that maybe a bit further. Yeah, but so I spent a year there, and I was literally burnt out by the end of a year. I was like, I can't do this. This is crazy. The working hours were just horrific, and it doesn't give you any kind of social life or private life whatsoever, and you can't really think about anything. Imagine, the company I'm working for now used to be Imagine. They supplied the stock photos to us.
Okay.
And so I knew the rep, and they were advertising for a senior art director at the time. So I just jumped it. I just said, oh, okay, I'm going to just go for the interview, and I got the job. So I've been in this company now for 14 years. 14 years, I think, tomorrow, actually.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. on 17th, so tomorrow or Sunday.
Yeah.
But anyway, and this company has been one of the biggest educations I've ever had in my life. I've gone through so much here, and it's been a huge, not just an education, but a pleasure to work for them.
Yeah. Okay. The thing that I'll have to pick at is because you've just described your journey that from doodling on paper back in the school days, and the wide range of work experience you've done over the years.
Yeah.
But in terms of being an art director or being involved in creative work. So my question is that how did you pick up relevance to be able to lead? In the creative field.
That's definitely something that comes with time and experience.
Right.
Yeah. They say that leaders are born. Maybe they are. They say that creative people are born with it. Maybe they are. I always say that everyone can be creative. Anyone, even to the amusement of our financial director, I said that even accountants can be creative. But maybe it's not such a good thing to be creative with numbers all the time. But everyone has an sense of creativity about it, and that's why I said, going back from doodling to what I do now, there has always been that inner connection. I've always known inside me that there is some creativity that needs to get out. So I've always gravitated towards any kind of creativity, whether it be music, whether it be art, whether it be contemporary dance, whether it be theatre. I've always liked to enjoy watching it. I like to watch movies. I like to look behind the scenes. I like to really go in depth of all these things. So being creative is something you will know whether you have it or not. But whether you want to get it out is entirely up to you. Leading is a completely different thing.
Yeah, okay.
Being able to lead a team successfully takes a lot of mistakes. It's very, very hard to take a group of people and be able to bring them to a direction that the company wants to go, that you need to go to. Because everyone is different. Everyone has different characters. You have to deal with people's emotions. You have to deal with people's non-compliance or whatever. You have to groom people if they are creative. If you see that in them and you want to bring that out, you need to groom them and guide them.
Right.
So it's very, very difficult. It's not something that anyone can do. I think you have to put a great deal of effort and work and understanding into people management, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. So, how was it so far in terms of your experience working as a creative director? You kind of like just went for it, like your previous endeavors.
Not really. It's quite funny because, as I mentioned in my previous job, doing odd working,
Yeah.
which I will come back to that later on. I was doing a lot of fashion photography. Again, when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I think I had my first camera.
Okay.
I think it was an old Pentax. And I still actually have the first roll of film prints I ever took, which is a picture of my mum and dad dancing at a party, which is very endearing to me. I've kept it all these years. So I went around and tried to learn as much photography as I can. Unless you go to libraries and learn, there was no internet, no YouTube that you could learn.
Not in those days.
So it was a bit of a grind, and you just picked up what you can. So you learn photography. So I picked it up over many years. I just going off on a little tangent here. Is one mistake I think a lot of people make is believing that they are something that they're not, and I think that is really crucial lesson for anybody who wants to get into the creative industry. So I've been doing photography for nearly 40 years.
Okay.
But I would never, ever call myself a photographer.
Is it just a matter of, okay, now is that a matter of, it's like keeping your ego in check, or is it a matter of not, is it a matter of, just don't, your head in the clouds might take you the wrong way, or you had someone to suggest to you, look, this is how you approach life. So how did you get around with that lesson?
I think it's a reality check. It's a reality check. I've spent time on set, on location with people who are genuine photographers.
Right.
And I believe that any discipline that you want to do, you have to spend years and thousands of hours perfecting that craft.
Okay.
You can't just pick up a camera and say, hey, I've got a camera, I'm a photographer. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. When people say that to me, and some people do say that to me, I tend to say, well, not really. You're not a photographer. You're just a camera owner, who likes to take pictures.
Okay.
It takes discipline. I've spent many years composing music. I think one of my biggest passions in creativity is music.
Okay.
It's probably my greatest and biggest passion and discipline is music. But I would never consider myself to be a composer. Right? I'm a guy that understands all the parts of what needs to be done. I understand photography. I understand music, composition. I learned synthesis when I was 16 years old.
Right.
So I understand very much from the base form and how the science behind music works. I would never say I'm a composer. I walk into our audio room. We have an audio team, and I watch them play, and I have the greatest respect for them because they have gone through those years of effort to try and learn their craft, and they are very disciplined in what they do. I personally haven't. I've just spent lots and lots of time becoming to an intermediate, to understanding of what to do. And I think being a leader, it's good to know these things. It's good to know to an intermediate level the craft of what your staff are doing, because then it gives you relevance to understand what's expected from them.
Right.
Right. So, for instance, if I go to my audio guys and I say, I need you to create 1,000 sound effects a day. It's completely not doable.
Yeah.
But if I didn't know that, I will probably expect them to do it.
Okay.
And their brains would hurt. It will cause them to be very, very upset. And if I demanded it, it will probably aggravate things, right? But because I know personally from experience that, okay, I can create easily 100 sound effects a day, then my expectations from them would not be too far great from what I know I can do personally.
Right.
So I might say to them, look, guys, I know you can probably do 200, all right? And that's a reasonable kind of expectation to have. And then that creates a little bit more peace. All right. So from that, going back to my first company, what I said was an odd company.
Right.
Working 17 hours a day, trying to be creative, I think was insanely wrong. I read a lot of creative books, obviously. One of my I would say mentors in life would be a guy called John Hegarty. He's a co-founder and chief creative director at a company called BBH.
Okay.
He's also from London or from the UK, and he's obviously a bit older than me. I think he's about 20 years older than me, but I can see parallels in our life.
Right.
So I can relate to a lot of things he says, which is really, really quite nice when I read his books. Like, oh, this guy's really got it. And he said a few profound things. One of the profound things he said was, you don't get creative by sitting on beanbags, which I thought was quite funny. which is very true. I think a lot of people think, oh, give me a beanbag, give me the environment.
Maybe it's a sign of the environment, but it doesn't make you
creative, which is quite funny. But probably one of the most profound things he said that really struck a chord with me is that he really hates brainstorming. And I read why, and I thought that's why in a lot of years I've been feeling frustrated, and I could relate it back to the first job that I worked with, why I had this huge frustration. Creativity is something that just happens. You know, if you're doing a job, you're working on a project, you cannot expect me to go into a conference room at 11 o'clock on a Thursday morning and be creative.
Okay, yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Right.
It really doesn't work. I might go home, walk my dog, eat my food, just chill out, listen to music, and the idea will come. It will come into my head. And I actually have a very bad habit of WhatsApping my colleagues at like odd hours of the night and morning, say, hey guys, I just had that idea, let's go and work on it in the morning. And they would say, okay, great. But you can't expect someone to be creative at a certain period of time. It just doesn't work. And that's the odd thing I found about that company who I worked with before, is that they will call you into these meetings on a Sunday morning and keep you there the entire day expecting something to come out of it.
Okay, here's one thing I want your take on.
Yeah.
There's creativity, which you say, hey, your brain just suddenly has that eureka moment.
Right.
Versus design, where there's a methodology to try and be creative.
Right.
What's your take on that?
Methodology to be creative. Yeah, I mean, okay, there are two types of creative in this industry. There are two types of creative. I'll boil it down to two types. There are probably more. There's the artist.
Right.
All right. There's the person who's artistic, who creates art for themselves.
Okay.
All right. So whatever they do, it's for themselves. And then there's the commercial creative. There's someone who creates art, but for other people.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you are always in that mindset where you are creating art for yourself, that's great. You can take it to a gallery. You can and you could probably show it off to lots of people, but it's not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
If you create it for outside and have that methodology for creating design to understand it for an audience that are not yourself, that are for someone else, then it gives you a greater chance of succeeding in this industry. You understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, again, make the mistake of coming into the creative world. And I've seen many portfolios in that, and it's all art. It's all very, very beautiful. But then I say, well, how does that actually translate into anything, any kind of like design? How does that translate into anything that outside people can understand?
Right.
And they're like, oh, I don't know. So there's a lesson there. There's definitely a lesson to there. Anyone who wants to get into creative, to try and understand your audience.
Yeah.
And if I may, do you want to?
I mean, it's not meant to be a killjoy, but
sure.
it's an acid test to say, look, you're producing something creative. Maybe it's art, maybe it's a beautiful picture, but then, is that it, or is that it? You need to put it out there. Maybe that's what you're saying, and
I mean, anyone who's going for a job in the creative line, you must obviously do your research on the company you're going for. I've had so many people coming in for interviews, and the first question I ask them is, "Do you know what we do?" And they're like, clueless, absolutely no idea.
Oh dear.
I'm like, well, why are you coming for a job here if you don't know what we do? But yeah, if you're going into a creative line that's maybe not a stock industry, because we're a very different sort of like fish.
Right.
If you're going into design into an agency, for instance, your portfolio must reflect work that can be understood outside. And when I say that, I mean not just Malaysia. Unless you're going to an agency that just does jobs for Malaysia, I think understanding different cultures around the world is vital, absolutely crucial. What works in Malaysia will not work in America. What works in England will not work in America. So you need to have knowledge and research of what happens in other continents and other regions. Even in America, what works in New York doesn't necessarily translate well in LA.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of that. And I think a lot of people don't spend enough time appreciating that or researching that. They don't spend enough time understanding different cultures. They tend to be stuck in their very little kind of bubble of their own little world and thinking, well, I can get by just creating ads for such and such and it'll work there, but it's never going to go any further. So having an understanding of what works different places. Humor is a very good example.
Yeah.
I mean, humor in England is completely different to humor in America.
Yeah. I mean, when I was studying in architecture back in my uni days, and the lecturers were sort of like aware as part of history to say, look, we've moved on in different phases, and now it's the postmodern where you understand context and build a solution, a relevant solution.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it applies whether you're an architect, you're in photography, creative directing, music, and such. Understand who you're trying to create for.
Yes, absolutely. One of the biggest mistakes I made when I first come into this industry was bringing the mindset of a fashion photographer.
Oh,
right, which was a disaster.
Okay.
I came in and I understood the business model because we used to use stock photos.
Yep.
But I thought that I could go on a shoot and treat it the same way as I did on a fashion shoot.
Right.
Which was a disaster. I remember my first shoot. I had to literally call up my colleague and say, "Can you rescue me?" I was hitting walls. It's not easy because the big difference is within the stock industry to the fashion industry is if you go on a fashion shoot, you have one day to get that one perfect picture.
Right.
You got the budgets there, you got the crew there, and you can spend the entire day just moving the light 6 inches just to get that perfect picture. But with the stock industry, you have to perfect at least 100 pictures a day.
Okay.
I mean, we can go on a shoot on a location and do 3,000 photos very easily.
Okay.
And you have to literally think on your feet. Obviously, we plan everything beforehand. We plan the production.
As best as possible.
We plan 99% of it. But on the day, it's down to the art director to try and bring it all together. So when you're working on one scene, it's like chess. You need to think 3 moves ahead.
Right.
You need to know what you're going to do 3 moves ahead. So you do that scene, then you quickly do another scene, and by the end of it, you shot like 3,000 pictures. We cut down and we get 100, 200 decent photos out of it. So that's the way we've always worked. I always refer to stock photographers as the special forces of photographers because of the intensity of what they have to do.
Right.
Whether many people will agree with me with that or not, I don't know. So there is a level of understanding photography. And that's what I said about knowing your craft. And I go on set with a photographer, with a professional photographer, and he could pretty much read my mind. I don't have to micromanage him and tell him exactly what to do.
Right.
I just show him the brief, we have a quick chat, and he will go and set it up, and it makes things a lot easier. So knowing your craft, knowing things from ground up, understanding what he's doing to a level which helps you to understand what you're doing. Yeah. And that's really important. That's why I gave that long story about starting right at the very bottom. Mm-hmm. Start at the very bottom of your craft and learn it. Learn it as much as you can. You might not become a professional in that, but it does help to understand other people, understand the people that are working with you or for you to work in a more efficient way.
All right. Yeah. That's great, actually. That's a great story you just gave there.
Right.
Okay. Now to, I guess, maybe take it a bit of a tangent. Okay, so where might you see moving, in the future about this?
About me personally, or about
your
business?
Personal future. What do you think could happen?
I'm looking to retire. No, I hope my boss doesn't see that. Or eventually, I do obviously want to do my own things. I've always had an interest in music, in photography and videography, and art in general, and other things. So I will continue that in my own personal aspects. I will continue that for as long as I can. With the industry is getting exciting. It's getting very dynamic.
Right.
Our industry cannot survive simply just on stock photos now. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at other places, other areas to do. Hence now why we are building a creative ecosystem.
Yeah, I've checked out 123RF and Imagine, and there's
Correct.
so many others.
That's right. Yeah.
Offerings.
Yeah. So we're offering tools to help creatives. We're offering education to help creatives in filmmaking and things like that. So there's a whole kind of like ecosystem coming together for creatives in general.
And you're part of the team to help move all this forward.
We are all part of the team to
Okay.
move forward, and not just myself, but we are all involved in one way or another to try and expedite this process. And it's working. It's working out really great. There was stumbling blocks at the beginning, but now I think it's working out pretty well. Yeah.
Okay. One question that's been bugging me a bit about photography, and there is an obvious answer, but I want your opinion on it, is that in this day and age, everybody has a camera, be it
Right.
smartphone and such.
Yeah.
And my question is that how much might it have affected the professional photography field?
That's actually not a new thing. That's been going back since the advent of digital cameras I would say,
Or even the compact camera?
in the compact camera, but more so the digital camera.
Okay.
The compact cameras. There was a time, it was around 2005. Before that time, 123RF did not exist. We had Imagine. Imagine was a premium stock library. Mm-hmm. So we sold very premium stocks at a very exorbitant price. But at the time, it was relevant. And the contributor base was very small compared to now.
Okay.
It was professionals or agencies who would supply us the content. But once digital cameras come on board, and once they become to a level where they were not so pixelated, I mean, we couldn't commercially license 2 megapixel images; they were just too small. But once they got to about 6 megapixels and above,
Right.
then they became more close to real photos. Still not that brilliant, but sellable. Companies would still license them for small picture images, small jobs. So around the mid-2000s, that's when the surge started coming. My boss had the insight enough to see that, and that's why he created 123RF, because he knew microstock would be the next big thing. The contributor base grew dramatically. The content size grew dramatically. And the photographers who were stuck with film were getting really
they were getting pushed out
and really irritated by it. I remember there were a few events that we would go to where professional film photographers would come up to us and start arguing. They would say, you're destroying the industry. You're creating a model that's going to kill us all, kill our effectively our jobs.
Yeah, they're going to kill their side of the job.
That's right. Yeah. But there were certain photographers who had the insight and the foresight enough to realize where this was going. So they jumped on board started creating their portfolios at a much faster rate around it. And there are literally stock photographers now who are earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a month because they saw what was happening. And I think that's one of the important things for any photographer to know, is to evolve your skills and your styles to any kind of trend that's happening. Yes, you're right. There are so many people with cameras now. And as I said, they're not really photographers. But you have to understand that even agencies now are taking their photos from places like Instagram.
Okay.
So there is relevance there. It's not whether we think you're a photographer or not. It's whether the image you're shooting now is relevant to the industry, is relevant to advertising, is relevant to the audiences. And what with the millennial generation coming up, things again are evolving and changing very, very dramatically. And we have to be aware of that. Any creative industry who is not aware of that is going to end up like those photographers and be swamped in the background.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so this is the part where I get into, it's more about you again.
It's always about me. Sorry, it's one thing about creatives that there's a diagram that suggests that all creative people have big egos. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's the part where I get into your insight and your insight about advising the future generations of creatives.
Right.
So perhaps starting from the bottom, as in for the person who has the idea.
Okay.
That maybe whether they get into creative photography or whether they get into photography or any other field, what advice might you have them? The person who's just got the idea at the moment, at that point.
I think obviously recognize your skills.
Or lack thereof.
Yeah, or lack thereof. I mean, you have to be realistic about things. You can shoot great selfies, but that doesn't make you great at doing what's required for a job. But the selfies might themselves be really, really good in understanding that you do have a very good eye for art, a very good art sense in your eye. So that could actually morph into something bigger. I think it's recognizing your skill, being humble enough to recognize that skill, I think is very important. Again, we have people coming in for jobs as Photoshop editors. Mm-hmm. And when they send their resume in, and one of the questions we ask is when they fill in the form is, what do you believe your Photoshop skill is? And we get a lot of fresh grads come in, they put 9.
Oh, as a skill number.
Yeah, okay. Then we test them. Then they go through it's a basic test, but it's fairly rigorous enough to weed out the people. And then we take them back in the room again. I put the form in front of them and say, do you want to redo that? And then they'll put a 2.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right. Basically, it's a string of questions that building up, from the idea. And what about the person who is out? They are more concrete in their decision. Okay. So they're taking from idea into skill. What advice might you have for them?
From idea into skill, maybe you can be a bit more elaborate about it.
I mean, basically, it's like if someone wants to become a professional creative,
right?
So they might be inspired, or they have an interest, or they have a firm idea, and then from idea they get into developing their skills.
Okay.
And what advice might you have for them in that phase of?
Is this someone who's already in the creative industry, or is
not yet?
Oh, not yet. So they want to develop the skills. So they're looking to move into the creative industry. Or
maybe it's whether it's through education or mentorship or whatever you can suggest here.
I think anybody who's got a passion enough to do things will always have a bigger advantage.
Right.
If you go into something that's half-hearted, you're not really going to impress anyone. I think you have to show a real willingness to do it. You have to show a real passion. You have to believe in yourself, in what you do. But not only that, you need to make others believe in you as well.
Right.
That's actually very, very important. Yeah. Okay. I think that's one of the most crucial elements of it, is to really, 1, know what you're doing, 2, be humble enough to accept your skill level, and 3, have the passion and show that passion and willingness to achieve what you're going to do. I think a lot of people nowadays go into a job believing that they're 1, going to get in the job real quick, 2, be at a very high level very, very quickly. And sorry to say that actually doesn't work like that. You have to work really hard to get where you want to be. If you're not willing to work hard to get there and take the mistakes, take criticism very well, which is another thing. A lot of people can't take criticism. They throw a tantrum and why my boss why doesn't my boss never like what I do, blah, blah, blah. If you can't take constructive criticism well, I would say constructive criticism.
Be it boss or teachers, that kind of
Exactly,
thing.
yeah. Then again, you're not going to get anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my third question, is for one who's, I think you covered it a bit, for those trying to get and participate into the industry. So they've got from idea, they're skill, and now they say, okay, how do I, how do I get in and be professional and get to that professional level?
Again, it's if you believe in yourself, if you really show that you really want to do something, there are people that will pick that up. I mean, sadly to say, there are people in power positions who are there just willingly for the power. I would avoid these kind of people like the plague. If you're going to go into that kind of position, at least work with someone who appreciates what you do. At least get into a position where someone can guide you. Be around people that can actually guide you into what you do. Don't ever be in a position where you're just a pawn for someone else's ego and you're feeding them work that they then take the advantage of and they get the praise for.
Yeah.
So that's very important as well. Is from anyone who's trying to get into creative industry, it's not always about yourself. You need to work with people who are also very creative as well, trying to find those people.
Okay. And my last one. Right. Any shameless plug for yourself?
Shameless plugs.
Yeah, the shameless plugs before we close out.
Of course. If you want to buy stock photos, stock videos, you come to 123RF, of course. I mean, anybody in Malaysia should be using them because we're a local company, and shame on you if you're not. But look into the other ventures that we do as well. There's film education. There's obviously, we have Pixlr, which is a great editor, which is an alternative to Photoshop, and it's free. So there are parts of our ecosystem where we can offer tools and things to people that will help them with their creative journey.
Okay.
So that's my shameless plug.
Okay. And with that, I close out the show. I've been speaking with Simon Dayton of 123RF, and it's a very interesting story. It was fascinating to talk
Thank you
about
very
your
much.
journey.
Thank you.
And if for more details, as in, hey, if you have questions, you can either write to 123RF or can we use your contact?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay.
So. Yeah. I don't mind fielding questions as long as they're not coming in like 20 a day.
Okay. Well, it's in the way to get in touch or perhaps have questions. It'll be in the end. It'll be in the closing slide, and it'll be in the description. So again, dear audience, thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Plusma-cast.
Great. Thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.